Carolina for quite a while. And as a former school psychologist, somebody who was previously a school psych, I'm always happy to answer questions whenever I can to help kids out and their parents. But of course, if you have any actual medical questions, this is not the place to get them answered. So speak to your pediatrician, talk to your physician, talk to your parents, of course, first. So we're not here to answer any medical questions or give any kind of medical advice whatsoever. This is just us talking about some questions that kids have and me giving you my personal experiences to give some insight. So I mentioned a couple minutes ago, I am an adult who likely has ADHD myself. Never been formally diagnosed, got some siblings who have been, and it's been known to run in families. So I believe I probably am an undiagnosed grown-up ADHD kid. So let's jump into our presentation here, guys. So we've asked you guys to send in some things. So some questions that you guys have asked. Someone asked, why am I different? Someone else asked, what causes ADHD? The first thing I want to set the tone here is it's not bad to be different. We don't want to be the same as everybody else. If everybody was the same, nothing would actually get done around here. So the differences that are between different people are a really helpful thing of beauty. So don't look at being different as a bad thing. Look at being different as an awesome thing. Because if you were the same as everybody around you, I guarantee you would not be that happy hanging out with everybody else if they were just like you. So you are different because sometimes you can struggle if you have ADHD to focus, right? You can struggle to pay attention. You can struggle and have a challenge sometimes remembering what to do, when you should do it, remembering to get to places on time, remembering to start homework projects on time, remembering to pick them up, put them in your backpack, take them out and turn them in. So these are some different things you can have a hard time with attention. You can be impulsive. You can say things and blurt them out really quick, and then you say it and you go, oops, I shouldn't have said that. Now I feel bad. So that's been known to happen sometimes with ADHD. So that can sometimes make you feel different from other kids. It can also mean that you are different sometimes because you may have a really, really hard time listening to things that are not that interesting. Hopefully I'm interesting to you right now, so you're listening really well. But things that are boring can be really extra hard for people with ADHD to focus on. However, things that are really interesting for kids with ADHD, I've seen kids almost hyper focus. So they have superpower focus when it comes to things that are interesting to them. And we'll talk more about that in a couple of minutes. But that's essentially what can be different from a high level about people, kids in particular, with ADHD versus kids who don't. They have a harder time focusing for a long time, have a harder time listening and focusing on things that are not as interesting or that are really, really hard. Sometimes you'll overreact to things. Either this is too big of a deal, it's too big, I can't do it. Or you'll underreact to things like, oh, I'll get it done later. It'll only take a few minutes, when in reality, your project is going to take like 3 days and it's due tomorrow. So these are some things that can make you feel different. But again, different is not bad. In this case, different is actually awesome. And this is coming from a guy who likely has ADHD himself. So what causes ADHD? I'm not going to drill too deep into that because, again, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a former school psychologist, but I can tell you some high levels to help you understand what's going on. Everybody's brain works differently. Generally speaking, you are born with ADHD. You didn't do anything to pick it up. You didn't catch it like a cold. Your parents didn't do anything to give this to you or to have prevented this. This is something that, like, I have brown eyes. My friend Brandon has blue eyes. My friend Mike has got hazel eyes. We were all born differently. We couldn't do anything to change our eye color. We were just born like that. And that's cool. I, maybe like you as well, were born with ADHD. Some other people were born with different things that make their lives easier or harder. Some people are born with being a righty. Some people are born being a lefty. Some people are born with a good memory. Some people are born with a not so good memory. Some people are born being fast runners. Some people are born being slow runners. You and I happen to have been born with a harder time focusing on some things, and we call that ADHD. So that's how you should think about it. And it's not a bad thing. I think it's actually a superpower. A buddy of mine who is a medical doctor, his name is Dr. Jim Poole, wrote this awesome book that he sent us a copy of, and he's actually just a few minutes down the road from us. But Dr. Jim wrote a book called Flipping ADHD on Its Head, and I love the concept because what he did was He titles it How to Turn a Disability into Your Greatest Strength. And Dr. Jim talks about something I've been talking about to my students when I worked in the schools for a long time. Dr. Jim calls it fast brain. I used to call it Ferrari brain. We'll talk about what that is. But that's the general gist, what you should understand about ADHD. It's something that you're born with, and it's not something that we can control. So here we are. Let's figure out, how do we harness this awesome superpower that some people might think can be a big challenge. I think it can be challenging sometimes, but it can also be a huge strength that gives us superstar powers. So let's take a look at why. But before we jump in too much, let's talk about other questions you guys had. Someone asked, why can't I be normal like everyone else? And then somebody had the thought to ask, what are the pros to having ADHD? So let's tackle this first question first. Someone asked, why can't I be normal like everybody else? Because being normal is boring, and you are normal, right? You're normal depending upon who you're hanging out with. If you're hanging out with me or one of the 5 to 7 million other people with ADHD around the country, you're totally normal, just like all the rest of us, millions of people who have it. Nothing abnormal about that. If you compare us to somebody maybe who is really, really well focused, they're super good listener, they focus on everything. Well, who's normal? I don't know. Are we normal or are they normal? I'm not sure. It depends on what you consider to be normal. But if you want to just take one part of your question and say, why can't I be just like everybody else? That's not helpful. We focus really, really well on things that other people can't focus so well on, which are things that involve being creative, thinking outside of the box, meaning being an inventor. What did I want to be as a kid? All I wanted to be when I was a kid was an inventor. And that's what I did. I invented Revibe. I just got my first US patent granted, which I'm really excited about. And I built this whole business up around supporting and helping kids through my invention. So that's a strength for people who have ADHD. And it's something to be aware of. If you were just like everybody else and everybody else didn't have ADHD, there wouldn't be a whole lot of inventing going on. There wouldn't be new products. What you guys might not realize is a lot, and by a lot, I mean maybe more than half of people who start their own companies, people who invent things, are people with ADHD, because we have a very creative brain that runs really quickly, and we can think of things fast, and we can develop things fast, and we build things fast. So it's being able to harness this superpower that's the challenge. But once you learn how to harness it, you can change the world. And I think that's really important to keep in mind. So what are the pros to having ADHD? I just mentioned a couple of them to you. We tend to be very creative. We can think in ways other people can't think of. What that means is we can solve problems sometimes way better than other people. Now, which normal would you rather be? Would you rather be a normal person who's not good at solving problems, or would you rather be a normal person who's great at solving problems? It just depends on which side of the fence that you think you fall on and what is your normal. But don't let somebody telling you that you can't do something prevent you from doing it, right? A lot of people told me I could never start my own business. I could never come up with an invention. I could never have a company. And I did all those things because I thought that I could, and I put in a lot of hard work, and here I am. And you can do the same thing. So let's take a look at some more things we talked about. Fast brain. This is something I've been telling my students back when I used to be a school psychologist for a long time. Dr. Jim calls this fast brain. He spells it with 2 I's. I just put 1 I because that's how I properly spell things. But Dr. Jim has a really cool perspective, and he spelled it wrong on purpose because he himself is also ADHD. He's a doctor who diagnoses ADHD for a living, and he has ADHD himself. And when he put in the website to oh, are we still there, Miss Morgan?
Yeah, we're here now. You're frozen for a bit, but we're back.
And what was the last thing you heard? I'm sorry, we dropped off.
Just the last slide that you were up on, you were talking about just people with ADHD are more creative and such, and they have fast brain, which is what you were last talking about, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So the fast brain. So so it's like having a Ferrari. And I was just saying, I love this Ferrari. This is an Enzo Ferrari. Truthfully, I have to admit, I'm a Mustang guy. Mustangs are my favorite car. But who wouldn't love to have this gorgeous Ferrari? It's fast, it's sleek. It can cover a lot of ground really quickly. And what's cool about your brain as a person with ADHD is that it's a lot like a Ferrari. It's a very fast machine. What happens though, when you have this brain of yours that moves really quickly, and when the world around it goes really slowly, like if someone's talking to you really slowly and you're wanting to go and do something that you're thinking about, and they just keep talking and dragging on, your brain starts to leave whatever they're saying and go to where your brain's going next. And then they'll say, "Did you hear what I said?" And you go, "Oop, what? Sorry about that."
Oh, and can you share your screen again for the next
Sure,
slide?
sure.
Yeah.
See, my brain's moving so fast, I forgot to share my screen.
Right.
There we go. So your brain's already moving on to the next thing when you have a fast brain. And that's what happens. So when you are in a classroom, let's say, and you've completed your work or you've thought about everything you wanted to think about for what someone just said, your brain's going somewhere else. So here's the challenge. Having a Ferrari is awesome and it's a privilege and you can go very fast and do a lot of great things. But having a Ferrari in traffic can be kind of a bummer. It can be a real challenge. This is your brain when you're doing things that are not so interesting and that are not so fun. You have a very fast car that is now stuck in a traffic jam. And now, what do? Your car wants to go, go, go. Your car's built to go fast. Your brain is built to go fast, but you're forced to go really slow. And that's a point that a lot of people have a hard time with who have ADHD. It's like having a Ferrari stuck in a traffic jam. But if you learn how to drive your brain as well as it can be driven in terms of understanding how to focus, you can harness the superpower. Again, the ability to be creative and the ability to problem solve and think of things and move quickly is a real gift. It's a very much a strength. And it's something that's helped me for my whole life. I mentioned earlier, I was able to start a company, have an invention, and get a patent, and all these cool things I've always wanted to do. And I've done that because my brain moves so fast. I'm thinking and problem solving and going on to the next thing. But it is helpful sometimes to have people around you who think a little bit more slowly and are a little bit more pragmatic about things. So it's good to have a good balance in your life. So that said, it's really important to just keep that in mind, that when you start to space out and someone's talking to you, that you're aware, oh yeah, this person's talking really slow right now. I need to take extra caution that I'm listening to them and that I'm focusing on what I'm supposed to be focusing on. And let me make a note to myself if I'm thinking about Ferraris right now, because I'm talking about them, let me write a note on my piece of paper that says Ferrari Enzo is the cool car that the guy on the webinar talked about. I'll look that up later. Okay. Let me go back and listen to him again. So that's what you can do in school. There's little things, little tricks you can do. We call them interventions that you can do that can help you to overcome any challenges you have and to harness this superpower that is an ADHD brain. So here's a question somebody asked, and I don't think I have an answer to this one. Somebody asked, if you have ADHD, are you more likely to be addicted to video games? I cannot tell you if you're more likely to be addicted to video games, but I can tell you you're probably more likely to be really, really focused on that game when you're doing well, when it's going good, and when you're having fun. I once had a parent tell me when I worked as a school psychologist, they said, I don't think my son can be ADHD because he focuses for 3 hours at a time on Minecraft and nothing can distract him. So therefore, he has great focus and he doesn't have ADHD. What I told them was, it is still possible. I think that your son could have ADHD potentially because he's focusing on something that's really interesting to him. Most other people, their focus runs out. Most people's focus is they'll focus very, very well on almost anything for a short to medium amount of time. People with ADHD will focus only a little bit of time on things that are hard or boring, but we can focus a ton of time, way more than your average person. on things that are interesting. So it's this hyper focus that's a gift. And now, should you spend all of your time playing video games? Probably not. But if you can get into and get interested by your work or your homework or a fun weekend project that's like an educational science project, you can learn about stuff. If you like robots, I love robots as a kid. I would get really into robots. I would spend hours and hours head down working on my robots. So you can harness, again, the superpower. Your teachers and your parents can take maybe a math problem that's not so interesting. You can make it about robots. Now it's kind of interesting. Now I can focus a little bit better. So you may be more likely to just get very focused on parts of video games more than other people. Why does ADHD make me irritable and angry sometimes? How do I manage impulses, and how can I stop myself from saying what I don't mean? So for some people, there's a couple of extra little things that come with ADHD, and it's not for everybody. If you've met one person with ADHD, you've just met one person with ADHD, because everybody's very different and very unique. There's a couple of general things that we are all kind of similar-ish with, but just because you have ADHD doesn't mean that you're just like the other kid or the other person with ADHD. You could have a couple of things in common and everything else could be different. So don't put yourself in this bucket and just say, this is just who I am. I'm stuck being this way because this person is this way, or because I've heard that this is what ADHD means. You are unique and you have your own strengths and your own challenges that you have to face. So some people who have ADHD can be a little bit more irritable and can be a little bit crankier sometimes than other people. And that's just a part of the way that their brain is built and that's wired. Again, it doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. It just means that it could be harder for them to control some of their behaviors or their emotions. How do I manage these impulses? Well, a trick I've told kids for a long time is, generally speaking, when you are going to reply to anything, take a moment. I used to call it, think about the Ferrari. I would say, pump your brakes, push those brakes down a little bit, slow down a little bit. So get in the habit of answering a little bit more slowly instead of just blurting things out. And that's hard, but it comes with practice. You can try to teach yourself, or you can have people around you who you love and you trust, like your parents or your teachers. You can have them, when they ask you a question, you can have them say, what happened just now with you and your brother, and take 2 seconds or 5 seconds before you answer my question. Count to 5 before you tell the answer. So that can help you to start to manage your impulses. The other thing, if you feel that you are upset, you're angry, you're hot, you're bothered, you're really agitated, tell yourself, before I do anything, I'm going to count to 10 slowly before I yell, blurt out, push, do anything that I'm going to regret. Let me count to 10 in my head, and then I'm going to ask myself, what was I just going to do? Let's say I was going to yell at my brother or my sister. Do I think that's still a good idea now that I've counted to 10? If it's that question, the answer is probably no, in most cases. So you'll be able to have a better understanding of what the right answer is if you give yourself a little bit of breathing room. Again, it's that fast brain. You've got to slow it down. It just wants to answer quickly. But sometimes when you don't think about things for a minute, your emotions get behind the driver's seat. So they get behind the steering wheel and your emotions start driving. Your anger or your fear or your nervousness or how mad you are, it'll get behind the steering wheel and it'll bump your brain kind of into the passenger seat. So you've got to give your brain a second to take control again, get the anger and the emotion out of the driver's seat, let yourself get back in there. How can I stop saying myself from saying what I don't mean? Same thing. The first thing is to understand it's important that words are powerful, and not all kids realize that. Some kids just think words are what comes out of your mouth and it's just some air. It sounds like Charlie Brown's parents, womp, 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 womp. But words are really meaningful to a lot of people. If you say something, it can really hurt somebody. Now, if you stomp on somebody's foot, which I do not recommend, that can really hurt somebody. But if you say something and it's just words, believe it or not, it can really hurt somebody. It can hurt someone's feelings. It can hurt a relationship with somebody. So be really careful what you say, because once those words leave your mouth, you can never put them back in. You can only add more words to try to make the first word sound not as bad. That's hard. So think about what you're going to say before you say it. How can I refocus after getting frustrated? I'll use the 10 rule again. Count to 10. Something else you can do that's very handy, ask your parents to show you what I used to call like some deep breathing or some relaxation breathing. Whenever I get really nervous or frustrated or whatever I may experience, particularly when I get like nervous about something. If I'm going to go do a talk in front of like a few thousand people or something in a big podium event, I'll sit in the back by myself for a couple minutes and I will just breathe quietly to myself. I'll take a big breath in and I'll hold it for a couple seconds and I'll let all the air out, and I'll get the air out all the way and I'll breathe in. And I do this like 3, 4, 5 big breaths, 3, 4, 5 times. Again, talk to your parents, talk to your doctors. They'll give you some good advice, but that's what I do for me. It really helps me to calm down and to refocus. You can also ask your parents about something called meditation. Meditation is kind of a relaxation training. There's been a lot of science lately in the past couple of years that support that meditation can actually help you improve your focus. So I recommend learning, with your parents and physicians and things like that, how to meditate. It gives you a chance to just sit and breathe and think and relax and just get your mind centered and focused. So that can really help after you get frustrated. Also, when you want to refocus after being frustrated, talk about it. In last week's webinar series, I mentioned the old science experiment that I used to do when I was in middle school or so. We talked about the Bunsen burner and the emotions that are inside of you. If you think about science, you've ever seen any science movies or Dexter's Laboratory or something where there's like, Bunsen burners and beakers and all these kinds of scientific apparatus that people are using, and there's little coils and liquid and things that are bubbling in test tubes. That is how your emotions are. Your emotions are stored in what I call, now this is, I'm giving you an example, right? This is an analogy. There's not really a test tube inside of your body. There's no scientific stuff inside of you, but just think of it like this. Think of a test tube. Usually when you're talking to people, when you share your feelings, the top of the test tube is open. So if you're heating this thing up and there's water inside, it just turns to steam and it kind of flies out and it's totally fine. But when you don't talk about your feelings and you keep it all inside, keep your mouth closed and you don't tell anybody how you're feeling, it's the same as if you took that test tube and you put one of those plastic or rubber stopper caps on top and you sealed it up. Now the pressure inside's still building because you're still angry or you're still sad or you're still frustrated or whatever you may feel, but it has nowhere to go because you're not letting it out, because your mouth is the portal to let all this frustration and all these feelings out. So when you keep it pent up like that, eventually something has to give. If it's a test tube, it's a glass test tube, you keep heating it up with water inside, it's going to explode. And it's dangerous, right? Glass will go everywhere. It'd be a very, very dangerous scene. So you don't want to do that. The same goes for your body, except instead of glass going everywhere, it's your emotions, your tears, your words, your arms flailing, crying, screaming. You will have an emotional kind of an explosion, if you will, if you don't tell anybody, hey, I'm feeling really upset right now, or what you did just really made me mad, or what you did just really hurt my feelings. It's really important to talk about how you feel with people. Talk to your parents, talk to your teachers, talk to whomever you trust that will listen to you. Something else you can do if no one's around, let's say it's early in the morning and your parents are sleeping and you've got feelings going on, take a piece of paper, you can write them down, put them in a little book or on a post-it note, and just give it to your parents later and say, hey, check this out. This is how I was feeling earlier. It's good to get those emotions out, whether it's with your words or whether it's with words on a page, but do express them. How do I let other people know about my ADHD was our next question. Well, this is a very personal topic for different people. Everybody is going to have a different answer, and there is no right answer. Some people might not want to let anybody know about their ADHD because they might feel like that's none of their business. That's my business, and they don't have to know anything about me that I don't want them to know. And that's totally cool, in my opinion. But for some people, they find that it's empowering. It makes them feel like they're back in charge, and that it explains some of the challenges that they may have if they let people know, hey, sometimes I struggle with focus and attention. Paying attention can be hard for me. So if I'm ever drifting off, just give me a tap on the shoulder or just call my name out. I'm not doing it on purpose. It just kind of happens sometimes. So some people will share that about themselves. They'll just say, sometimes I struggle with focus. Focus is not my strong thing. I get really focused on things I'm interested in, not so focused on things that are harder for me or more challenging. So just want to let you know that. Other people will just come out and say, hey, I have ADHD. So just so you know, if I'm ever unfocused, that's the reason. So you have to ask yourself and your family what works the best for each of you. And then you can figure out your own answer. But those are some examples of how some people tackle that challenge of, whether or not they let people know if they have ADHD. Why does my brain feel fuzzy sometimes? This is a good question. By fuzzy, what I think this person was asking was they feel like they're confused. Particularly, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say if you're in school and you're sitting there and you're listening and you're learning some new math problems, and all of a sudden you kind of realize that where are we? What were we talking about? Or the worst of all, from when I was a kid, they would say, Rich, what do you think that the answer is? And you go, what? Sorry, what question? And then that's uncomfortable and you feel kind of fuzzy, like you've just kind of come out of a fog. So this typically happens because you will lose focus. When you're listening to someone very intently, you can track what they're saying, you can understand, you can tell them back what they just said, you can probably answer their question, or at least you'll have an understanding as to what their question was. But when your focus tends to go in and out, sometimes your brain will sometimes kind of press the pause button. Think of a movie or a video game, you're pressing pause on whatever is presented in front of you, and you kind of go inside your own head and you start thinking about Ferraris and Mustangs and 427 Shelby Cobras and everything that my brain starts thinking about when I get off task. So your brain might do the same thing. Something that is important to realize is that there are things you can do to help to reduce this. There's something you can look up with your parents. It's called the SLANT technique. I won't do the whole acronym, but it's something like sit, lean, attend. And basically it's saying that if you prop yourself up in your seat and you lean forwards and you are listening and looking at the person's eyes who is talking to you, if you're in a classroom, for example, you're way more likely to be able to listen and focus well than you would if you were sitting back in your chair and you were kind of looking at the ceiling and you were playing with your hair or snapping your wristband or something like that. So you have to set yourself up for success. So, but to answer your question, whichever person asked that, your brain can sometimes feel fuzzy because sometimes it'll press the pause button and you will kind of lose track as to what was going on around you. How can I stay focused when I'd rather be doing something else? How can I manage my impulses? The impulse is one we talked about earlier. Try the counting thing, count to 10. Try to slow down before you answer. If you know you're upset, do some breathing, do something that you know will put you in a better position to not be impulsive. You can also come up with some things for yourself on the impulsivity side, where if you know that, when your brother takes this one toy from you that you love, that your immediate response is to scream at him or to take one of his toys and throw it on the ground, then what you should probably do is, again, physically position yourself for success. When my brother takes my toy, I know I have to immediately walk out of the room. I'm thinking about that before it even happens. I'm just going to leave and I'm going to go to another side of the house so that I can't grab his toy and make a bad decision. So you can try to manage your impulses like that, and eventually you'll start to learn what your triggers are that make you act impulsively and what things result of that. In terms of the first question, how can I stay focused when I'd rather be doing something else? A couple things you can do, and this is hard, but you can practice. Practicing anything makes it better. So you can practice with what's called a reward system. Now, a lot of this is just trying really hard. The only way that you can focus better is to make yourself focus better. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do it. The thing I've learned in my experience is it's not that people with focusing challenges can't focus. It's that we can't remember to always refocus ourselves. So we'll look and then we'll drift off. And then here's the part where everyone's different. Some people will go, what am I doing? Oh, I'm looking at the ceiling. Oops, I'm back. They'll do that in like 2 seconds, 5 seconds. Other people will drift off for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. When we did some research for our product Revibe, I learned that the average kid who we were observing really could use a reminder about once every 1 or 2 minutes. That's about what we saw in the real classroom settings. So most kids who struggle with focus need a reminder about once every minute or two. Now you can't send them that often because it gets annoying. If somebody taps you on the shoulder every 1 minute, Rich, get back to work. rush, get back to work. It's going to get annoying. So you have to figure out a good balance. But some things you can do to try to train yourself, to remind yourself to be more focused, is to just be more aware. There's something called metacognitive awareness, is what I refer to it as. It's the act of being aware of your own thoughts, because the more aware you are of your own thoughts, the more in control you are to control your behaviors, right? If I'm always thinking about how I might not be focused when I'm in school, I'm probably going to be more focused. But if I'm never thinking about it until someone calls my name out and embarrasses me, then I probably will not be that focused. And when I do get my name called out, I'm going to be pretty upset or sad or offended by it. Or I might start to think that I'm not so awesome as I really am, because it doesn't feel awesome when someone, might embarrass you. But keep in mind, you are awesome. As I said, this is not a bad thing. This is a superpower. We just have to harness it together, right? So some of the things your parents and teachers can do to help you to just be more mindful of your thoughts and behaviors. We've seen good success with things that are called a behavior reward chart, sticker chart. If your parent or your teacher says, every time I see you and you're focused, I'm going to give you a sticker or a coin or a token or a puzzle piece that you can use to get a no homework pass or an ice cream sandwich or 5 minutes later bedtime, you're going to be more aware, like, oh man, I want to, every time they look, I want to be listening. So even if you're not doing a great job of it, the fact that you're now thinking about being more focused, you will probably be more focused, even if you're not perfect. And when you drift off, your brain's going to go, you want that ice cream sandwich, don't you? Yes. Oh, I need to focus again. So you can be motivated to more consistently try your best to focus. And you will generally, most people can focus a lot better when they are trying. So that's one thing you can do, is a behavior reward system. Then there are reminder systems. So our wearable Revibe, this is one kind of a reminder that learns when you need the most reminders. It learns what classes that you need the most reminders, or what subjects at home if you're homeschooled. And it sends you reminders through a vibration on your wrist that just taps you quietly so no one can hear. And when you get the tap, you ask yourself, oh, am I doing what I should be doing? Nope, I have to get back to work right now. And it's something that kind of helps you to be more mindful. And then there's some cool rewards and some badges in the app that we have, and then you can learn all this cool stuff about yourself. So that's how Revibe works. It's learning your needs, and it's giving you some data back and some badges and rewards and animations to let you know that you're doing a good job. And it shows you some graphs and some celebrations for you. But you don't need a Revibe necessarily to do that. You can do, as I said, a behavior reward chart. You can set a timer if you're at home. You can set a kitchen timer. Once every 3 minutes or 5 minutes, you can have an alarm go off that reminds you to ask yourself, what am I doing right now? Maybe not in school, because then it would just ding and everybody would start asking what that noise was. But if you're at home, you can certainly set a kitchen timer. You can ask your parent if they can set something on their phone, reminders at certain times to remind you to ask yourself what you're doing. You can also build in some breaks. Break times are important. Your brain is kind of, in my opinion, your brain's kind of like a battery. You only have so much energy in there, and then when it starts to get lower and lower and lower, it doesn't really work so well when it comes to focus. And you have to plug it back in for a few minutes and get the charge up, and then you can use it and then do it over again. What happens when you don't charge a cell phone is this: your cell phone will show you this annoying battery light that will say, charge me, charge me. And then when you don't charge it, it shuts off. And when you try to make it work again, it shows you the battery logo that says, sorry, I'm going to take 5, 10, 15 minutes before I'll turn back on. Now, if you would have just stopped to charge it for a few minutes, it would have never turned off. That's kind of how I think about your brain. So you can take breaks. Again, use a timer. You can use a Revibe. We have a mode for that called homework mode that tells you when to work, when to take a break. But again, you don't need that. It's a great tool to have. It's helpful, but there's other things. You can have a timer. Set the timer for 15 minutes, 15 or 20 minutes at the most. When the timer dings in your kitchen or wherever you are in your room, take a 5-minute break. Set the timer back for 5 minutes. Let me take a 5-minute break to recharge my brain a little bit. And then when the 5-minute timer dings, you go back and do your work again. So there are certain things like this that you can do. We have a lot of great free blog content in terms of little tips and tricks like that. If you go to our blog page on revibetech.com, you can learn more free things you can do to help yourself. You don't have to use technology, although technology is certainly wonderful. So those are some things you can do to refocus. The other thing you can do when you'd rather be doing something else, as I mentioned earlier, is to equate what you're doing that's so challenging, equate it to something that's interesting to you. If your math problem is asking you about, let's say, how many, just numbers, we do this by this, multiplied by this, and divided by that. What if you're really into baking? Let's say you love to cook. Instead of just doing fractions that are boring, has no meaning, you can add your own word problem and say, let me pretend like I'm doing a recipe and let me figure out how many cups and an eighth or a third or 2/4 of this, 3/4 of that. Let me make this interesting to myself. And your parents and teachers can do the same thing. All right, do you have any suggestions? Help me stay organized. I do. Because maybe I'm ADHD, I forgot my planner I was going to show you guys in the conference room here at Revibe. But we have a free planner that's really helpful. Doesn't cost you anything. Just go to our website. You can download it for free, and you can print it out. And what the planner is, it goes in a 7-day format. So you'll be able to list your week. You can fill in all the things you have going on. You can put your daily schedule in, especially if you're being schooled at home right now, which is a whole other topic that we just did last week. But you can put in your daily schedule. So from this time to this time, I'm supposed to do my social studies. From this time to this time, I do my math. I'm going to take a break in here and a break over there. But that'll help you to get organized. It also has a couple of neat things where you can write down assignments that you have to do. So things that you might forget, you can just write them down. A lot of times I've found that people with ADHD will dart around in different subjects. They'll dart around conversations with whatever comes to their mind, not just because they're impulsive. That could be a part of it. It means that they just want to say it immediately. But there's also the fear or the concern that we might forget this great idea that we had that popped in our head, and we don't want to forget it. So what I suggest you do when you're trying to get organized is, if you have an idea, if it's not the right time to think about that idea, to unpack that idea, quickly write it down on a piece of paper and come back to it later. Our planner gives you a little bit of room and some paper where you can actually write things like that down. You can give yourself a rating and say, I think I did a good job today, or I think I could do a little better tomorrow because I didn't do this so well, but I know I can tomorrow, so I'm going to try my best then. But you can use planners that are like this for free that are paper. You can use, if you have a family iPad or a tablet, an Android tablet, something like that that your parents let you use, you can certainly put in little reminders for yourself, meaning, so one problem we didn't talk about, or one challenge that people with ADHD have, is called executive functioning. We touched a little bit upon it before, but essentially remembering when projects are due, how far in advance I should start working on them, remembering to put it in my backpack now that I've done it, to turn it in. These are things that are hard to remember when you've got a plate. If you think of a tray, like a waiter or a waitress in a restaurant has a tray. The bigger the tray, the more stuff you can hold on it without spilling it off and dropping on the floor. But if you have ADHD, your tray might not be able to hold quite as much stuff before you start to forget things. That's what executive functioning is. So you can get better organized by putting little reminders for yourself in the future. So you might say, I do this all the time for myself. You might say, I know that my project is due Friday morning, so I'm going to put a reminder to myself on Monday to make sure that I'm almost done with it, Tuesday to finish it up, and then on Thursday to make sure that I've packed it in my backpack for Friday morning. So you can set these reminders up to set yourself up for success. A couple more questions. We're going to wind down here. What can I do to help myself with ADHD besides medication? We've talked about a whole bunch of things before about things you can do to help focus and attention and things like that. So I'm going to zoom through that one. Can I make my ADHD unnoticeable without medication? Everybody's really different. Some people are very, with ADHD, are very challenged with focus. They have a hard time focusing. Other people with ADHD, though, a part we didn't really get into a whole lot today, they can just be very hyperactive. They can have a lot of movement. They can be fidgety and move and go. So because everybody's so different, I can't speak to if you could ever become unnoticeable or not. But what I can speak to is movement is good for a lot of people. What we're learning, we have a data scientist here at Revibe, and what he's been learning from looking at our database and all our data that we we collect internally to learn more and drive the science of focus forwards, is that, and we share this back with each user in our app. So we'll share things back with our users, like, did you know, we're looking at the Revibe data, and we're letting you know as a parent, or you as the child, that when, let's say when Tommy was able to spend 15 minutes per day fidgeting before lunchtime each day, his attention span was 6 minutes longer on average each day over the past month. Or when Jennifer got to take 3,000 steps before social studies, she was 21% more focused than when she didn't have those steps. So we present that in our app right now to let people know how movement can help for some kids, or how it could potentially, or has potentially been helpful in the past for this person. So keep that in mind. Moving more, get yourself up, take a break, move around. For some kids, it's potentially really helpful to get some movement in and some physical activity. Can I learn to concentrate? Will I ever be able to get over my ADHD one day? So the first one we just kind of talked about. The second one, will I be able to get over my ADHD one day? This is interesting. I've read a study, but it's been a very, very long time since I've read any updated studies on this particular question. But a long time ago, I remember I read a study that said about half of people or so with ADHD tend to outgrow some or most of their challenges when they, get around 16, 17, 18 years old, 19 years old. They start to outgrow some of the things. So maybe they outgrow the hyperactivity and the moving around a lot, or maybe they start to outgrow some of the impulsivity, or maybe they outgrow some of the focus challenges. But a lot of, this is my anecdotal experience, which just means, from me talking to people and experiencing the world, a lot of people that I know with ADHD who are adults, I don't know a lot of them who have ever said, I'm completely outgrown every single part of it, totally as if I never even had it. But I have heard a lot of them say, things have gotten a lot easier for me because I think I've outgrown some of the things, or they've gotten better naturally. But I've also learned a lot about what I can do to make myself more successful, so that I don't even notice these things anymore, because I set my day up to be successful. And I've learned to manage by doing all these different strategies and interventions. So while I don't know, if there are necessarily people who will outgrow it completely one day, I feel like you can get way, way better at focusing, and you can get substantially, have an easier time at being successful. Let's hit a couple more, and then I'll leave you guys with something soon. I know we're running over time, and I appreciate everybody who's staying on board. Why is it harder for me to do schoolwork at home? Simple answer. Home is supposed to be fun, and school is supposed to be structured and work and learning. Right now, a lot of you guys are at home learning at home. School has desks and everything is very rule oriented, and we have times where things start and times when things stop, and they're very exact, and bells ring to tell us when to go to the next class. Home doesn't have that. Home has us and our families and our parents and our grandparents and our brothers and sisters, and there's TV and video games and snacks. It's really hard to get your act together, if you will, and focus well when you're transitioning from school learning to home learning. I strongly suggest you get a routine involved, get one in place where you can say, from this time to this time, every day, I'm gonna do this, just like we did in school, meaning you can set it up so that it's different times for you, whatever works better for you and your family or your caretakers, but have something where every day we do this at the same time from here to here, we do this from here to here and that from there to there. That will allow you to start to refocus better. Get in a zone at home where there's no distractions if you can find that. Do not do schoolwork on your bed. Your bed has trained your brain to go to sleep. You lay on your bed, your brain says, time to go to sleep. I'm tired, I'm out. So don't try to do homework on this bed because you're used to sleeping on it. Do work at a desk, at a kitchen table. Do work somewhere where you are not going to have your phone or your computer or something blinking and texting and tweeting and all these things that are distracting. Set yourself up for success, because it's more important for us as people with focus challenges than anyone to put ourselves in a position of success. And how can I stay motivated and focused at home? Again, use a behavior reward chart. Get some kind of a thing. It could just be break a puzzle apart and say, every time I do a good job, could you give me one of these pieces and I'll start building it. And I know that I'm getting closer to getting to the prize. So that's a good strategy, is to bring some kind of an extra cherry on top for being well focused at home that can help with motivation. So that's all we have today for you guys. I really wanted to share one thing with you guys as we sign off here. And I can see every single person who started this webinar with us has stayed on, which I really appreciate. That's awesome. Not one person's left, even though we went 20 minutes over. But it's important to go over because I want you guys to hear this message and hear it loud and clear. When I used to work as a school psychologist, I would hear this from kids and it broke my heart. They would tell me, I feel like I'm not as smart as other people. I feel like I can't do it. I'm not good at school. I'm never going to pass. I'm never going to be as good as the other kids. And it's just totally, completely not true. When I used to look at the IQs of the kids, meaning, when I looked at how capable that they were, I would give them, it's called an IQ test, to see where their skills are, how capable that they were at solving problems and things like that. Kids that I worked with ADHD were typically just as capable, meaning they're just as smart or smarter than other kids who did not have ADHD, even though their grades may not have shown it. You may have a C or a D, or maybe you're getting 60s or 70s in math or social studies or science, but your IQ might be 110, which is in the above average range or the high average range. So that means maybe you're not doing as well as the other kids on your tests, but you certainly can do just as well or better than those kids. The reason that you have that gap between your intelligence up here and your actual school performance sometimes, which may be down here, or maybe you're doing just fine, or maybe you're doing terrific. But if it's down here, what I've found myself to be that missing differential is the ability to listen and focus and complete your work, turn your work in, study for enough time, be prepared. So it's that focus. So once you can learn to harness this super brain that you have, this supercar brain that is a real gift to you, and it's a superpower. Once you learn to harness it, I promise you, with enough hard work, you may have to work harder than the other kids. And that's stressful and it's not always fair. But if you're willing to put the work in and you're willing to learn how to overcome your focus challenges, I can promise you, myself as an example, inventing something, starting a company, getting a patent, doing these things I've always wanted to do. There's lots more who have done much bigger, better things than I have. But if I'm one example who you're talking to today, it's totally possible. Just do not give up, do not sell yourself short, and do not quit. I'm Rich Brancaccio with Revibe Technologies. Thank you guys so much. Good luck and stay well.